as we think about your journey to enduring success, the first critical choice that I made was to pick up the phone. That's what Rebecca and I are talking about. Anybody that follows me or sees the TEDx talk, I picked up the phone the moment my sister called, and it was my first choice. So I've always thought about this. Now, I have since then made other first choices. But what I've learned is that success really begins with making a first choice. When you reflect on your journey, is there a first choice that you know really impacted where you are today?
100%. So this ties in so well, because the first moment that I felt my real mortality came about 10 years ago. And it was when my sister called me and said that my sister-in-law, who had been a sister to me for 20 years, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And it's a moment that pulls the rug out. We've all probably had those phone calls. And I really considered my own mortality. And I thought, gosh, if that had been my diagnosis, I'd be so disappointed with the life that I'd lived, right? So I quit my job, I sold my house, and I divorced my husband. So that maybe it's a 3 first choicer, but like, I knew the choice that I made was that I was done living in fear. And every decision I'd made up to that point, I'd made out of fear. I'd made out of fear that I was going to disappoint my parents. I was going to disappoint, my professor. I was going to disappoint whoever the person of the hour was that I had to prove myself to. And so that first decision was I'm no longer living in fear of disappointing people.
It's simple yet profound. And now you help leaders and not even just leaders, just people around the world embrace that a little bit with fearless. What I think is interesting is most of the time, my follow-up question is, and so now we're just going to be reflective here for a minute. Most of my time, my follow-up question is, why is it so hard to make a first choice? And what do you think the number one answer is? What's the
so hard?
Yes!
Fear. It's fear. It's terrifying. It's always scary. And you know what? This is actually maybe something that we can lean into, because what I've realized now, when I feel fear, I'm like, oh, that's something you need to do, right? It's not a run away from it. It's a signal that like there's something important there, and I really need to look at it closely, rather than, oh, hide it up, turn it away. Like, this is what we do with stress all the time, right? We don't want to stress. We're like, oh, let's do some yoga, do some meditation. Not that there's anything wrong with yoga and meditation. Big fan. But like, you can't just get rid of it. You're like balling it up and hiding it away. And we know the outcomes get worse. Same thing with fear. If I feel fear or stress, I'm like, that needs my attention. I need to look very closely at that. So yeah, I think it's a great insight.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Choose and Become interview series. To check out more episodes, go to www.trishkendall.com/podcast, or go to any of your favorite podcast channels, including YouTube, under Trish Kendall Speaks, and you'll find this interview and more. Choose and become.